Hi everyone, it's HailHeidi again. Today we are reacting to Cities Aren't Loud, Cars Are Loud. We've been talking about European cities versus US cities, how the two differ, things like that. So you guys have been requesting this one like nonstop. So I'm really excited to watch it. Thank you guys so much. Let's do this.
As a warning to headphone users, I'll show this icon when it's about to get loud. It's about to get loud.
Okay.
Cities can be loud, really loud. We all know this, but we don't often talk about the implications of noise pollution on our health and happiness in cities. So I was really glad to see a whole chapter devoted to urban noise pollution in the new book by Chris and Melissa Bruntlett. Far too often, noise concerns are dismissed as a minor inconvenience. But this chapter of Curbing Traffic has lots of fascinating research about the very real health consequences of urban noise, where it comes from, and what cities can do about it. Noises over about 85 decibels can cause hearing loss, but there are other health implications that have been discovered when people are exposed to constant noise levels above about 55 decibels.
Okay, really quickly in between his sentences. Look at that cluster of wires. Holy cow. That is so many. This is in Vietnam. Wow. That's kind of cool. Amazing.
Which is the maximum amount of average noise considered acceptable by the WHO. And 65% of Europeans live in places with average noise levels above this limit. Of course, many other cities are much worse. Cairo, Egypt averages 90 decibels during the day, 11 times the WHO guidelines and into the range of permanent hearing loss. And in Karachi, Pakistan, rush hour noise levels have been measured at over 140 decibels, which is an insane 360 times higher than the WHO guidelines and about as loud as the deck of an aircraft carrier.
I never realized that there were guidelines for noise control. That's really interesting because around here we're pretty good, but I went to New York City one time and I was just amazed at how much honking and yelling there was. I'm like, holy cow, it's just the ambiance of this place. That's just the background noise. Very fascinating.
But even at much lower levels, noise triggers the stress response in almost all vertebrates. But since humans are good at adapting to our environment, we don't often realize when we're exposed to noise levels that are harmful to our health. Long-term exposure to noise is associated with several negative health outcomes, including heart disease, hypertension, high stress levels, and faster cognitive decline. Noise disturbs people's sleep as well, and this can be caused by a single roaring engine, siren, horn, or car alarm. Traffic noise has effects over the quality and quantity of sleep, which over time leads to cardiovascular problems, focus problems, and even obesity. But noise also affects our behavior as well. A study in San Francisco found that exposure to traffic noise made people less likely to speak to others, assist strangers, remain patient, and demonstrate generosity, and more likely to prematurely end conversations, become agitated, disagreeable, and argumentative. It's also very clear from the research in the Bruntlett's book that the overwhelming majority of noise in cities is caused by motor vehicles.
Definitely. Like, I'm trying to think of something else that might be louder. You know, I feel like that's just mostly what it is. Maybe garbage trucks. Garbage trucks are extremely loud, but they only come around once a week, at least here. Huh. Interesting.
Reading this chapter reminded me how annoyed I get when suburbanites say they hate the city because it's noisy and polluted, when the reason it's noisy and polluted is because of the cars that suburbanites insist on driving into the city. Part of the problem is that people driving cause a lot of noise pollution, but experience very little of it themselves as they sit inside of their soundproof cabin. The most obvious example of this is the car horn, which at 110 decibels will scare the crap out of anybody outside of a car. Here's my hot take. Car horns should be as loud on the inside of the car as they are on the outside. Urban noise has become so normalized and so pervasive that we just take it for granted that cities are going to be loud. It's become normal for city dwellers to buy noise-canceling headphones for their walk to work.
Yeah. Even when I'm sleeping and there's maybe too much noise upstairs or my husband's snoring or something like that, I have earbuds that I use and I just have like background noise or ASMR or something like that on my phone just so I can cancel out anything else. But yeah, definitely on the city streets as well.
But it doesn't have to be this way.
I can't hear.
It is possible to significantly reduce urban traffic noise, and many countries have noise pollution laws, including the US, the UK, the EU, and many others. But very few have the political will to actually do anything about it. Dutch cities are significantly quieter than most other cities, and much of that can be attributed to the Wet Geluidhinder Act of 1979. One Dutch city that has taken the issue of noise very seriously is Delft, which is where the Bruntlets happen to live and the place that they write about in their book. So I decided to buy a decibel meter and get on a train for the first time in a year and hear what all the fuss was about.
Oh, there's like a little bit of talking just now. That's it.
When you step out of the train station in Delft, you're immediately struck by the deafening silence. It's remarkable how quiet it is.
That is quiet.
My decibel meter was showing below 55 dBA, which is about that of a typical household refrigerator. Pretty quiet for the area right outside of a train station. By the way, all of my noise readings are in dBA, which is decibels weighted for noise perceived by human hearing. If you want to learn more about the differences between decibels and dBA, or how to compare logarithmic decibel values, well, you got a web browser, open it. The street outside the station in Delft is Phoenixstraat, and until recently, there was a major elevated rail line that was a significant source of noise. In 2014, a tunnel was completed, moving the rail line underground, and instead of turning the area into a 6-lane stroad like you just know they would do in the US or Canada, they used the space to build some low-traffic streets, a dedicated transit right-of-way, and a canal.
Wow. Yeah, in the US, it's expand, expand, expand. Why would you make things smaller or less flashy, I guess? That's interesting. That's cool because I could see that was right outside of people's houses. Ooh, that would be terrible. So good for them.
This new design now met the maximum noise requirements, so the city was permitted to build more housing and office space in the area. So what are some of the things that Delft has done to make the city so quiet? Well, since
that car was too loud? Just kidding.
Vehicles are the largest source of noise pollution, the best solution is to reduce traffic volumes, which of course has other benefits as well. The city has implemented a traffic circulation plan that routes motor vehicles away from the city center as much as possible, and they encourage public transit and cycling as alternatives. The Markt in Delft is a beautiful and peaceful historic square where you can hear birds chirping, church bells ringing, and the murmur of conversations from people dining nearby.
You can really eavesdrop when you're there. Ooh, people watching would be very, very fascinating. I'm just kidding. Don't just listen to people's conversations for no reason.
Can you believe that this was a car parking lot until as late as 2004? What do you think it sounded like when this photo was taken in the 1970s? With the cars removed, the pedestrianized city center gets so quiet that I was able to measure sound levels below 40 dBA, which is as quiet as a library.
Whoa.
Well, unless the Albert Heijn is throwing an opening party, then it's a bit louder. It's really
awesome.
enjoyable to be here. There's a sense of calm and peacefulness that you get when going somewhere quiet, and this was something the Bruntlets mentioned in their book. When they lived in Vancouver, they used to escape to the forest or a cottage, and this is something they thought they would miss moving to the Netherlands. But what they found was that it wasn't so much the forest they were craving, but a break from the incessant noise of the city. And here in Delft, they can get that any day just by walking into the city center.
Yeah.
But if you can't remove motor vehicles, then the next best thing is to slow them down. The noise from cars comes from two major sources: propulsion noise, created by the car's engines, exhaust, transmission, and brakes, and rolling noise, which is caused by the tire friction with the road surface. We very often focus on the propulsion noise, but for most cars, the noise from the tires becomes significant at about 30 kilometers an hour, and over 55 kilometers an hour, it becomes louder than the engine itself.
And then it's like a constant loudness. It's not just every once in a while you're hearing someone accelerate or someone honk or something. It's just a constant loud. That would, yeah, I could see that making people very uneasy without them really knowing it, though. Very interesting.
It is possible to reduce tire noise significantly by using low noise tires, but manufacturers have lobbied against this for years because they're dicks.
True, I know that. I've never heard of that. So that's so funny.
So if you can't mandate low noise tires, what you can do is slow the cars. Reducing vehicle speeds from 50 kilometers per hour to 30 kilometers per hour will typically reduce noise by about 6 decibels. Yet another reason why vehicle speed should be less than 30 kilometers an hour in urban areas.
Okay. Yeah, I know that sometimes just because of the way that I live and the way that a lot of people live around here, it's always go, go, go. And so I feel like it would take me a second to get used to the slower speeds and things like that. I feel like I'm trying to go fast, everywhere I go, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can to get to the next location. I feel like it would be very different. I wonder if it would drive me nuts or if I would feel peaceful and, happy about it. I don't know. That's really interesting.
Another strategy, used extensively in Delft, is quieter, porous asphalt. This kind of road surface can reduce rolling noise by up to 6 decibels. When I learned about quiet asphalt, it explained what I had experienced when I first arrived in Amsterdam by train. Look at how close the highway is at Amsterdam Zuid station, and yet the traffic is remarkably quiet. I've stood next to a lot of highways when making these videos, and they are nowhere near this quiet in any other country I've filmed in. Porous asphalt is more expensive than regular asphalt, but it's up to 10 times cheaper than installing noise barriers and soundproofing. Plus, it really only needs to be used on roads with higher speeds, and for safety reasons, most Dutch streets have 30 km/h speed limits anyway, which means that very few roads need this kind of expensive treatment. Finally, as a last resort, soundproofing can be installed, such as these green barriers recently installed at a school in Delft. These were installed because noise from the adjacent arterial road, as well as a nearby highway, were above permitted noise levels. Visiting Delft was really enjoyable. It's amazing to see a city that takes noise pollution so seriously. And even outside of the city center, Delft was remarkably quiet.
What a cool thing to focus on for a city. It's like, let's make sure that our students can focus on their work and not listening to all the cars outside. That's really cool. I love that they did that. I've never seen those kind of glass barriers as far as I've noticed. Maybe they're around some places, but I just haven't noticed them before. Very, very cool. Love it.
Returning to Amsterdam, things aren't quite as peaceful as Delft, but it's still remarkably quiet. The area around Amsterdam Zuid station, where my train arrives, is the financial district, an area that's mostly pedestrianized. Every financial district should be designed like this. After my trip to Delft, I was curious how much noise was created by different kinds of vehicles, so I headed to a nearby street in the early evening where traffic...
Sorry, really quickly. I'll go back so we don't miss what he said, but look at those bike paths. Those are beautiful. They are wide. Here, a lot of the time in the US, the bike paths are so small. It's like, how do you expect them to just stay in that? And then some of the cars are kind of in the bike path anyway. We do not focus on bike paths very often. I think there are some cities that do better than others, but those are gorgeous. Beautiful.
Traffic was light enough to get individual reads.
Sorry.
After my trip to Delft, I was curious how much noise was created by different kinds of vehicles, so I headed to a nearby street in the early evening where traffic was light enough to get individual readings of vehicles as they passed. Keep in mind that the decimal is a logarithmic scale and 60 dBA is twice the perceived loudness as 50 dBA. The lowest reading I took, during a gap in motor vehicle traffic, was just over 42 dBA. about as loud as the inside of a quiet house. A passing cyclist was about 55 dBA, and an e-bike was about 60 dBA. A group of cyclists riding together and talking was around 65 dBA, which, unsurprisingly, is about as loud as a normal conversation.
Yeah.
When it comes to peak noise levels, 65 dBA is about the level that starts to become irritating to most people. So when we're talking about noise in the city, it's peak noise levels above about 65 dBA.
Definitely. I mean, I would honestly, just because I'm just learning about this, I would definitely expect the irritation level to be way above people biking and talking. You know what I mean? I feel like for me, that's very quiet still. So, oh, fascinating.
The sound of passing cars varied significantly by speed, but it was usually around 73 dBA. Heavier vehicles like SUVs and vans were about 76 dBA, more than 4 times louder than a bicycle, and 10 times louder than the ambient noise of the street itself. One of the louder vehicles, and the most common source of noise complaints in Dutch cities, is mopeds. They are everywhere in Dutch cities, and they're about twice as loud as a typical car.
Yeah.
Of course, there are not nearly as many mopeds here as where we lived in Taiwan, but because Dutch cities are quieter than most other cities, they stand out a lot more. I cannot tell you how many peaceful street scenes I've filmed that have been ruined by a passing moped.
That is motorcycles in the US. Oh my gosh, they are so loud, which is good because you need cars around you to know where you are so they don't just run into you. But man, it's like, holy, calm yourself. Yeah, I agree.
Dutch cities will never be quiet until we do something about these leaf blowers on wheels.
I love it.
The worst offender, though, by far, is what my kids call farting motorcycles. They're pretty clever kids, so I'm going to assume that's the accepted term. Now, motorcycles can be better for the city if people choose to drive motorcycles instead of cars, but there's no denying that farting motorcycles are really, really, really loud. They were by far the loudest noise source in my test at over 100 dBA, 6.5 times louder than a car and 22 times louder than a bicycle. Farting motorcycle enthusiasts may tell you that they need that sound for safety, though there's no evidence for this claim, and there's good reason not to believe it because most of the sound is emitted behind the vehicle.
Dude, I just said that. Wait, there's no evidence behind that? Well, that's embarrassing. Yeah, that's what everybody says. Huh. Okay, so it's pointless? Good to know. I'll have to look more into that. That's very interesting.
But what would be better for safety of motorcyclists, of course, would be to focus on making the streets themselves safe, because then they would also be safe enough for pedestrians, cyclists, and other people who don't find it necessary to interrupt every conversation within a 2-kilometer radius. I cannot wait for these things to go away. But there is a legitimate safety concern with electric vehicles. At low speeds, they're too quiet for pedestrians to hear, which is why electric cars in Europe are now required to make a noise when traveling at low speed.
Oh.
So electric vehicles are definitely an improvement, but only at low speeds where rolling noise is minimal. In fact, electric cars may be even worse at high speeds because tire noise increases with tire width as well as by weight. The Italian-designed Biro microcar is quite quiet. No complaints here. But Teslas, for example, are designed primarily by and for Americans, so they're excessively large and heavy vehicles, and my sound readings reflected that. A passing Tesla had a noise level of about 73 dBA, which was equivalent to farting cars going the same speed. So at speed, there's not a huge difference between the sound of a farting car and an electric car.
Every time he says farting, I'm like, tee. I am so mature. Oh my gosh.
Which means the only way electric cars will significantly reduce urban noise is if they're speed limited within cities, which, for safety reasons, they should be anyway, but lots of policymakers are still in denial about this. Electric trucks make a bigger difference because truck engines are so loud, though this electric truck could really use some oil. A typical major arterial road rarely dips below about 80 dBA, and you might argue that this is just the price to pay for mobility. But consider this street, Plantage Middelaan in Amsterdam. one of my personal favorites. This
So
street
cute.
has only a tram line and bicycle path, and that gives it a carrying capacity of over 12,000 people per hour, which is equivalent to an 8-lane strode. And yet, it was almost always below 55 dBA, only occasionally peaking at 76 dBA when a tram went by.
Beautiful.
Or consider Vondelpark, which is a high-capacity bicycle highway during rush hour, but it's almost completely silent. Living in the Netherlands really made me realize that cities aren't loud. Cars are loud. And moving lots of people doesn't need to be loud.
Yeah. But, well, actually, sometimes using cars is slower than just walking because of all the traffic. So maybe speed isn't even an issue. But I think that's what we're so concerned about.
Also, grassy tram tracks are the best, and they absorb noise too. So given all of the health and social problems created by loud motor vehicles, it's reasonable to ask, why do we still allow them in cities? But in order to avoid being too one-sided here, what are some of the arguments against banning loud vehicles from our cities?
He loves his
like
life.
cargo vroom vroom. Yeah, that's a tough one. I can see why so many cities have trouble with this decision. I'm very thankful to live somewhere that takes noise pollution seriously. Amsterdam has created noise maps, like this one, that show the daily noise levels around the city, weighted by time of day. And they have a concrete plan, or is it an asphalt plan, to address noise pollution in the city, a city that is already significantly quieter than other cities of its size.
That's so
I haven't
lovely.
left the Netherlands for over a year and a half now, and I've gotten very accustomed to the lower noise levels here. So I'm curious to see what it'll feel like to be back in car-infested fake London when I visit this summer. But wherever I travel, I know that when I return, I'm going to be very glad to step off the train in Amsterdam Zuid and finally enjoy some peace and quiet.
Aw.
I'd like to thank my supporters on Patreon who pay me to measure the
Yay!
noxious emissions
Thank you,
of
all the
farting cars.
Patreons. Oh my goodness. I love that so much. It's true that it is absolutely chaotic, but it's funny because, like, at least in movies, they'll kind of portray this, that if you live in a big city that's loud all the time, sometimes when you go somewhere quiet, sometimes it's harder to sleep, or you see, people, needing sound to have that background noise because it's too quiet. I don't know if that's actually a thing. I'm not sure, but I laugh whenever I see something like that, like in the media. But yeah, that is super nice. Whew. And I thought he was actually going to go through the pros or the other arguments for having cars in the city, but there wasn't any. Oh my gosh. I mean, if it was less crowded, I could see cars being very helpful just to get from one place to another a bit faster. I know that at least in Salt Lake City, here in Utah, USA, it's not as crowded of a city as some of these, New York City or Los Angeles or things like that. And it is nice to be able to drive a car around because you can just get from one side of the city to the other a lot faster, at least I think. And then you don't have to wait for trains, things like that. I know that I love my car, but it is like if you got into that lifestyle and if you planned your time accordingly to be able to get from one place to the other, maybe with a wait time for a train or a couple of stops in between, what a nice, like, less stressful environment to be in. I really love that because it is I didn't realize that even that the part where he was talking about people biking and talking, that's around the noise level that people start to get irritated with it. And I'm just like, what the heck? You'd never, at least I probably wouldn't notice that that's what I was, that was affecting me so much. And I bet that everybody's different as well. I know that it's probably different for every individual, but very interesting concepts. I'm going to look into what laws we have here in the US. He mentioned there are some in the US with, noise stuff. I would love to know. I know that we have, don't make noise after 10 p.m. in some areas, but I wonder if there's a certain level that they're looking for. So, very fascinating. Love learning about this kind of stuff. It's just something that we just don't think about much here because it's just loud. It's just loud, and that's just how we live. So, but anyway, thank you so much for recommending this video. I really appreciate it. If you have anything else to recommend, please put it down in the comments. You know that I love that. Thank you for all of your opinions, your stories, correcting me with whatever I might get wrong in a video. I do appreciate that as well, so thank you. But otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Bye.